Joe Rogan is well known for ruffling some feathers and making controversial claims. This is especially true within the UFC. He's one of the biggest commentators in the organization. On top of that, competitive fighters are known to trash talk and cause conflict outside of the ring. So, it's no surprise that there are fighters who don't like the popular podcaster. Here are some of the biggest fighters who hate Joe Rogan. Starting off, we have the former UFC heavyweight champion Frank Mir. Mir established himself as a force in the ring and a threat to other fighters in his division. The conflict between Mir and Rogan began with the heavyweights bout against Antonio Rodrigo Nogueira. The two heavyweight fighters squared off in the ring, which ended in Mir winning by technical knockout. Knocking out the Big Nog was a huge win for the fighter. But the winner felt his victory was undermined by some comments made by Joe Rogan. During Nogueira's next fight, the commentator noted that he had been hospitalized due to a staph infection. He added that the hospitalization was a few weeks before his loss to Mir, noting that it may have affected his performance in that fight. That is what set off the former heavyweight champ. Mir later called Rogan out for making excuses for certain fighters for why they performed badly. He also said that every fighter deals with health issues and things that affect them each fight. The Big Nog caught wind of those comments and said he was happy to do a rematch. The two fighters eventually did get that rematch at UFC 199, where Mir won again. That win received acknowledgement from Joe Rogan, but the damage had already been done. Next up on our list is Tony Ferguson, a former lightweight pro in the UFC. As a professional fighter, Ferguson dealt with lots of blows and physical pain, but nothing seemed to hurt him more than a blow to his ego and potential bias in the ring. At the height of his career, Ferguson was an interim UFC lightweight champion. He was also known for going on an impressive 12-fight win streak that included fighters like Kevin Lee, Donald Cerrone, Josh Thompson, and others. During an interview for the MMA Hour with Ariel Helwani, Ferguson admitted that he felt the commentators for some of his fights were biased. According to him, that led to a narrative that painted him as a bad guy in the ring. The commentators he called out specifically were Joe Rogan and Daniel Cormier. He noted that Cormier may have held bias in a specific fight because it involved Khabib Nurmagomedov, a former teammate of the commentators. He said the two essentially ganged up on fighters they didn't like. Ferguson also added that he thought about going on an episode of Rogan's podcast. He decided against it because of the bias displayed in his fight commentary. The lightweight also took other opportunities to badmouth both commentators. Rogan knew the fighter didn't particularly like him, but revealed it may have been for a different reason. On an episode of his podcast, he spoke with former UFC fighter and commentator Paul Felder. Rogan revealed that he made Ferguson mad by calling him a brilliant weirdo. It is unclear if the bitterness still remains, but it's evident that it doesn't take much to set off Tony Ferguson. The next fighter who hates Joe Rogan was a big name in the organization for years. That fighter is Ronda Rousey. Many know that Rousey was a big name in the UFC when she was a rising star. The former Bantamweight champion energized the league, becoming one of the biggest stars at the height of her career. A lot of industry veterans praised and hyped her up, and that includes Joe Rogan. The UFC commentator took it even further when he made some bold claims about the female fighter. One of his biggest claims was that Rousey could take down a lot of her male counterparts in her weight division. Everything came crashing down on Rousey after she lost to Holly Holm. It was made worse when she had a shot at getting her title back from Amanda Nunes. But she lost again, in even worse fashion. Like many, Rogan walked back on his comments about Rousey, saying he got caught up and exaggerated his praise. He went back on his comment about her being able to take on male bantamweight fighters. His withdrawal of his other positive comments about her set Rousey off. After the losses, she had a few more fights in the league, but avoided Rogan when she could. This was on full display during one of the pre-fight weigh-ins. Ronda walked off stage before Rogan could get to her for a pre-fight interview. She's probably cooled down since then, but you wouldn't want to get on her bad side in the first place. Following that, we have Tyron Woodley, another fighter who hates Joe Rogan. Woodley has built a name for himself in the league, but not for the reasons you think. The fighter has been known to complain about a lot of things in the UFC. That tendency to voice his complaints has ruined his image a bit in the eyes of fans, other fighters, and commentators. He also received criticism in the past for his laziness when it came to title defenses. After his title defense at UFC 214, Joe Rogan commented on the fact that his match broke the record for least strikes in a title fight. The issue Woodley had with Rogan and other commentators was the fact that Israel Adesanya didn't receive the same comments when he employed a similar strategy. Woodley echoed the same comment about the record for least strikes in a title fight, calling out Rogan. He said it was just excuses and exceptions, arguing that there was bias against him in the league. Fans made fun of his comments, given his history of complaining about other fighters and things. The next fighter is someone who's known for being vocal and controversial. Chael Sonnen is another fighter who has been vocal about his hatred for the UFC commentator. Although he's known for stirring the pot and having beef with other fighters, Sonnen's biggest attack on Rogan had nothing to do with comments about his fighting. The conflict between them started because of comments about Colby Covington, another controversial fighter. At UFC 225, Covington won the interim welterweight title. Rogan commented on the fighter, noting that his polarizing smack talk is an act to draw more ticket sales. For some reason, Sonnen took offense to the comment that it was fake. The former fighter called it inappropriate and infuriating, adding that Rogan did it all the time. He said that it wasn't right for the commentator to lift the curtain, so to speak, and share industry secrets with the crowd. Rogan later acknowledged Sonnen's outrage on his podcast. He called the comments dumb and was unsure at first if they were serious or not. That shows what he thinks of the former fighter's opinion. Things have settled down, and the two seem to be on better terms. We finally come to the last UFC fighter who hates Joe Rogan. That fighter is former featherweight Cris Cyborg. Cyborg was an established female fighter in the UFC for years. She dominated the competition with her skill and raw power. That made her a target for jokes and criticism. On Rogan's podcast, he, Dana White, and another comedian made fun of Cyborg live on the air. The jokes about the fighter were aimed at her physique and revolved around calling her a man. They joked that she was the only fighter to make weight by cutting off her penis. That made the female fighter deeply uncomfortable. Rogan also insinuated that she was taking steroids to achieve her physique. She responded by calling him a bully for the comments. He later apologized, saying that he shouldn't have made the jokes. But the damage was done. And years later, she admitted she still felt the stigma from their jokes. She felt it was unfair that she held a championship title and was attacked by leaders in the organization. Eventually, she left the UFC altogether. It's likely she still harbors resentment for Rogan, his podcast, and the UFC. Despite all the fighters and other celebrities who've had beef with Joe Rogan, he continues to do his own thing and make controversial statements. By now, he's used to being in hot water and facing criticism. It's still worth noting these incidents because he's so involved with the UFC. Well, that's it for the fighters who hate Joe Rogan.